Hi and welcome to Hospitality Huddles. I'm Scot Turner and each episode we'll be uncovering the industry's biggest challenges and serving up the solutions to help overcome them. We're bringing together some of the best thought leaders in the industry and finding some of the most creative minds shaping the future of hospitality from all around the world. They're going to share insights tackling the pain points operators just like you face every day. Hospitality Huddles is more than a podcast, it's a community of passionate individuals who appreciate the art and science of hospitality and want to help answer the difficult questions. If you like the show, one of the best ways to support us is to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. It's only going to take a couple of minutes and it really does make the difference. So let's get on with today's episode, and all that's left to say is welcome to Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality meets conversation, one huddle at a time. We're not going live this time. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Hospitality Huddles. And today we are doing a follow-up of probably the podcast episode that has got the most traction in terms of comments back, which was the podcast with Jay Ashton about why every restaurant needs a podcast. And from all the posts that we did afterwards and what Jay's done as well, there were so many comments about it that I thought it'd be really useful to get back onto a show with Jay. And he did a great article, 47 Reasons Why. And instead of replying back to some of those comments, we have a good chat about it and see if we can convince some people who were a little bit skeptical. So, Jay, welcome back onto the show. Really appreciate it. For those people who maybe don't know who you are or haven't yet listened to the first episode, I'll give you a quick 60 seconds and then, let's start convincing people why every restaurant needs a podcast, right?
Sure, I always say this is 60 seconds. We're gonna have a few more seconds. No, I've been in the industry 34 years, restaurant industry. For 34 years, I have worked with thousands of restaurants across Canada, really coaching them and working with them on everything around their business. I also built the business resource side on what we provide customers when it comes to resources and solutions from Cisco. So I also built that for the company as well for the last 12, 13 years. Doing that has been really where I've focused a lot of the energy. And then just recently, in the last 4 years, I built a media company within Cisco to really also advertise and share out there all the amazing stories and everything around our industry. So I've been really dabbling in the podcast space now for about 4 years. I think we've completed around 1,500 shows. I also do a late night show right now, Monday to Friday. We're trying to call it not a podcast, but we're trying to change things in the podcast space to really turn upside down a little bit and make sure everyone in the industry knows how to do one. But I have a big saying that I think, Scott, that we've we've kind of played with a lot, believing that every restaurant should have a podcast, and I believe everyone should.
Yeah, for sure. And this will probably come out a couple of weeks later, but earlier in the week, we were doing a project on a golf resort, and we'd got through the first day, and we'd achieved so much in this day that I sat with my ops director, Bal, and I was like, "Should we record a podcast episode?" And he was like, "What about?" I said, "Let's just talk about what we've done today. We've done training, we've done menu development, we've done a menu tasting, we've done setup, we've done I can't even remember what we've done that day." So we got a couple of lapel mics out on location and we just sat there and talked about what we'd done in the day. We released it the other day. And I listened back this morning and it was such an amazing show because it was so authentic. We had such a great connection because we worked together all the time. And we talked about stuff that people don't really talk about. And when I read your 47 Reasons Why, there's a couple of bits in there that just reminded me of this, and actually it gave me inspiration because, like, one of them in there was explaining. Let me just find it. Explaining the way that you do menu development, and it was just there's one reason why every restaurant should have a podcast because telling your guests what goes
Mhm.
into what they see when it comes out on the dish is such a great one, isn't it? So let's have a chat about that, and then I'd love to get your
Yeah.
favorite ones.
Well, I think when you look at, let's get into that a little bit because the more you say it, the more I really think it's a must. Because the old days, and we used to say this over here in Canada, is that used to romanticize the menu, right? And people would go in and you would redo the structure in the menu to describe all the dishes and where they came from, the origins of the dish or the items. And um, those days, in a sense, not saying you don't do that today, but it's kind of doing that in a way through a podcast model, is taking those stories that we created on those dishes or with those dishes and really amplifying them and into a place where people all can listen to them. And it may be a chef or your owner or whoever created those dishes with the stories behind them. And that could be from where the farmer that you're working with or the supplier you're working with, or the reasoning behind the dishes will add the value to those dishes. I think a lot more stronger than text itself, right? I think text is important on the menu, but additionally, do you imagine if you could QR code into a podcast on the menu and says, "Why don't you listen to the stories that we've created here with these menu items on this section?" Maybe it's just the appetizer section or the protein section, and it talks about who those people are. And the simplicity of doing podcasts and stuff. And I think podcasts for restaurants today, what I'm thinking when I say every restaurant should have one, I don't think I'm thinking maybe in the traditional format like a lot of people are thinking when they come to a podcast. I'm not thinking 45 minutes or half an hour talk. I'm thinking maybe some are 20 minutes and some are 10 minutes and some are half an hour. It's all over the map. Or take a chapter from Gary Vee on what he's doing over in his podcast model. It's all over the map, right? But he's just creating content. But I really think from a restaurant aspect, when you get into those menu items and having those stories being heard, and you can even interview the farmer that created the beef for whoever. Like Scott, it keeps going and going and going and going on why it's so important to have every restaurant should have one.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as well, because the one that we did the other day was 30 minutes, and it just flowed really nicely. But it was just so easy to jump on and just do it really quickly. And I think you're right. Like, even just going on and doing 10 minutes. Hey guys, this is what we're up to this week. We've got, I don't know, we've got happy hour on all week. We've got this. We've got some new cocktails. Let me tell you all about those cocktails
Yeah.
this week, and why don't you come in and do it? Like, it doesn't have to be, it could be as easy as a TikTok video that you
Yeah.
do for TikTok, and then maybe you take it and you put it out onto a podcast thing, which is super easy as well, right?
100%. It doesn't have to be the format that we see a lot in. That's the best part about podcast. We don't have to follow
Mm.
that format. We can make it what it is. There's no rules. And that's probably why I like it as well. There's no rules in a sense on what that model can look like. And it can be very different every time. And you can maybe there's a theme that month on the shows that you're doing in collaboration with that you're doing on your menu or in your restaurant. There's so much that you can do in this space. I guess the best way maybe to look at it, Scott, is that we're giving restaurants their own network, right? You're
Yeah,
getting your own network. And you can get as creative as long as you don't get into the salesy, pitchy stuff, unless that's what you say it is. That's as
yeah,
transparency and pure authentic. I have no problem if you say, "Hey guys, we're going to talk about this thing and we hope you can buy it." We're going to say what it is. It's going to be a selling show today, and we're going to sell our salad dressings, and we're going to talk about the history of salad dressings, and we're going to talk about the story of the salad dressings. As long as we say what it is and we're not trying to um uh, not tell the full truth of what the show's about, then you're okay. I think you're
yeah.
completely okay. But if when you get into trying to manipulate or not be truthful to your audience, then you're going to get into trouble, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's such an important one to do. I think when it comes to when, and this has resonated quite a bit with me as I've been reading your stuff, is that authenticity of what you do is super key. No matter
Yes.
what it is, whether it's transparency on the menu now, whether it's being upfront with people, and I think the more you add value to guests, the more then you'll have the opportunity to go, this is a sales episode, guys. Like, we're gonna show you all about what we need you to do from here on in. But because you've built so much value in maybe 5 or 6 shows before, people will probably sit there and go, okay, let's give these guys a chance. Let's see what they're up to. But if you don't provide, and it's one thing I've learned from being on LinkedIn every day, if you don't provide value, people will just switch off and they won't even come back to find out what's going on in future. So I think that's the bit for me is always remember, as much as you want to kind of talk about you, it's how you build as much value for the guest as possible. And I think that's about looking at what are the reasons
Mhm.
why that person might need to come to your restaurant and seeing how you could do it. So are you coming for a special occasion? Are you a place where people go for lunch? Like, what's the driver? And start talking about those things first, because it means when you want to talk about something you want to talk about, people will resonate with it much more because they understand, right?
Absolutely, and I think this is where, the world today does not wanna be sold anything. No one wants to be sold, especially with what's going on with the economy and everything, and everyone's very cautious of where their spend is in relationship to the value that they get. And I think the more and more that becomes very evident in our world today, that we have to come at the selling process in a different angle, or the process of
Mm,
providing value in a completely different angle. One, I think we have to be innovative, and I think we have to be truthful, authentic, um, and engaging in entertainment style, right? Like we need that entertainment style. And I think those things really kind of connect into the restaurant industry so well, is that I always say we have the right recipe to make incredible content every day within the industry, either through a social channels or through a podcast model. Now, the difference I like about podcast is that within our industry is that it's the last frontier in my mind that hasn't really been corrupted yet. And it's coming. We know
mm,
that. We know AI will be a big role into it. But right now it's still pure, right? It's still an opportunity to sit down, or someone sit down with earbuds in their ears, or have an intimate
mm.
time with you and your brand and what you're talking about. And typically podcasts are not, we got to start something here, but typically podcasts are not group events yet, right? And
Mm.
that might be something down the road, because there's no rules that you can't have it. But right now, it's more of an intimate setting with an individual, right? So it's not necessarily um, something that you're out there with a group. But the beauty about it is that you have their attention for that time. And when you look at marketing today, one of the key drivers is getting the opportunity to have that person's attention to spend with you. And when we try every tactic there is, and we've tried everything there is when it comes to providing um, the connection within our marketing messaging, right? And what we're doing within our messaging. Well, what's better than 20 minutes or 30 minutes with someone telling you a story about their dishes on their menu, or their chef story, or how they built this restaurant, and have it engaging. The trick is making it engaging, right? It's
Yeah.
to make it interesting. And if you get too out there without being, and that's the best part, is our restaurant industry is so creative and innovative. It's perfect. But is that if that will be the biggest, I guess, hurdle for a lot of people, is go, where do I start? And I always say the best thing you can do is just hit record, and just
Mm.
go have a coffee and talk about your restaurant, and that will lead into another one, and that will lead into another one.
Yeah.
I just don't know of another, and I would love someone to say, here's a better marketing channel today, because I don't know
Mm.
I can find one. And I
Yeah.
think and I've been in marketing for long, long, long time, and I just haven't found something. It's almost the back to the days of, do you imagine when the first magazine came out? The first magazine
Yeah.
came out, and we went through it, and we're like, wow, look at all this information I can gather in this magazine. Look at these ads. Look at what I'm reading here. I'm learning. I'm entertaining myself in a sense, because you're by yourself, you're enjoying this moment together with this magazine, and you're having this moment. This is just audio in the world we live today, because today is everything's video or audio based, because of the, thanks to our mobile devices and everything else within social. So we've shifted over there, right? Like it's kind of like the days of coal to oil to electricity. We're seeing this shift over. So I think personally we're going to see this shift over even more, and how our operators retain, and not only retain content, but
Mm.
also deliver content out to their guests.
Mm. Yeah, I think I've just while you were talking, I just googled definition of a podcast on Google,
Okay,
and it
what's it
says
say? What's it
a
say?
a digital audio file made available on the internet for downloading to a computer or mobile device, typically available as a series, new installments of which can be received by subscribers automatically. And I think we touched on this on the last time. Actually, as a verb, it's make a digital audio file available as a podcast. So, I think we touched on this last time, isn't it? Is take Gary V for example. He sometimes posts episodes that are 10-minute sound bites of a speech he's done or a keynote
Yeah,
speech he's done,
yeah,
and you can hear all the rustle and bustle in the background. The sound is crap and all the rest of it. So it could be as easy as getting I got some lapel mics the other day off the TikTok shop, which
yeah.
the Americans listening to this will be like, ah, crap. Okay. It was 6.99, and we
Well,
recorded the podcast the other day with Bal, and the sound, all right, it's not like using the Shaw mics we've got now, but it was good. And it could be a chef literally sat
yeah,
there in the kitchen talking about what he's doing, how he's plating the dishes. So here I am. I've got my amazing fillet steak. It's from X farmer, and it's got this grade and that grade. And now I'm going to dress it with a beautiful jus. This is how we make it. This is how long it cooks down for with the bones. That could
yeah,
be on a lapel
yeah.
mic, so it doesn't have to be intentional. And I think what I picked up from some of the comments that certainly were on my post is I think people thought it was going to be, we were talking about having this production similar to what
Yeah,
you do, similar to what I do, Sean, everyone who has
yeah.
like formal podcasts. But it doesn't have to be that way, does it? It doesn't have to be so intentional, so created, so edited, so clean. It can be
No,
because it's the kitchen, because it's the restaurant. It
yeah.
could be raw.
Well, that's the beauty, and I think the more and more that we see this imperfection of building a podcast, right? Like we need to be raw. We need to allow the noise or I think COVID. I always say COVID gave us the opportunity to have a kid in the background, a dog barking, and that's okay. We accepted it. The first few
Mm,
weeks it was like a little odd, and then we just got normal. Everyone, showing up into pajamas, everything else. We got used to that, and I think today we saw the beauty of what that was because we saw people in a pure. We saw who they truly were, and I think today we actually enjoyed that moment. We saw CEOs in their pajamas. We saw people at home. We got we got into their worlds a little bit through these audio shows and video shows. We got into their world. You're in my house right now, right? You're in my studio. And I think that allowed us to look forward and we enjoyed that. I think a lot of people went, I kind of liked it. I kind of liked seeing the
mm,
real who you are. I think when you look at going into where we're headed with podcasting within the industry, overall, it's about the content, the amount of content, and it's okay if the mic's a little blurry or the video isn't perfect or you're shooting it from a lapel mic or you're shooting from a studio mic. I think at the end of the day, and I take this from what Gary does, it's all about the content quantity of what you're producing. And if you're so stuck on the quality, you're no different than the radio that is totally dying left and right. And and why don't we like the radio? One, it's our choice. We don't make the choices of what we want to hear, so it's not on demand. Two, it's so polished that we don't believe in what they say. And then they get kind of goofy on top of that, trying to make you
mm.
buy into what they're talking about. And that's even worse, right? Like it's even worse than just lying to me. Now you're trying to lie to me and trying to make me engage with your goofy crap. So I think when you look at where we're headed down this road, that's the beauty. There's no rules. You can craft it the way it is. Tell stories. You don't need to pay a fortune for mics and studio equipment. I always say grab a phone, grab a mic, or grab a lapel mic, or grab a studio, whatever you can afford and do. Just create content and make it edutaining. That is the key. That's it. If you, I just caution, and I know, like I'm working on some projects right now around building social selling videos, right? Like build stuff through a social like that. We're calling what it is. Like you have to call it what it is. At least then people know what they're walking into, right? Like if it's going to be this, this is what it's going to look like. There's no surprises. There's no untransparency. We're going to be transparent about this. This is what you're going to get. If you don't like it, then we'll do something else. But I think that's the key. But that's the beauty about it. Like, I just there's so much in the restaurant industry that haven't been cataloged either in the stories.
Mm,
They haven't been saved. I think of podcasting almost like a library, right? There's all these different
yeah.
stories that we have in a library, all these amazing books, and they're there. And we know that they're even moving to them all digital, right? You have to make them all digital so
Mhm.
they last forever. Well, I think the same thing is that we have all these amazing restaurants across our countries. And if we don't record their stories, one, we can't learn from them, and others can't learn either. But we're going to lose them as some of them are, disappearing. And these stories of triumph and amazing ideas and how they thought about their business and all this stuff. First of all, we haven't had a platform to hear them. Two, they tend to be lost forever when the people pass or they close their restaurant. We can't learn. How do you learn from that? How do you learn? Maybe that's one of the keys that our industry, sometimes is challenged on the profit. So what it's doing is because we haven't listened enough to learn from all these, people that have done this before, and we're just repeating history. So, but when you look at a restaurant, Scott, much. There's a story on every inch of a restaurant, every inch. Can we keep going?
Yeah,
Just keep going.
I
I can
no, no,
just
no,
keep
no, no,
going.
sorry, I've got kids in the background, so I was muted.
See, it's
Um,
good. It's good. It's good. It's good. That's what I'm talking about. That's okay.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, I also think, do you know, it's funny, as you were talking then, I was thinking I went to go watch Stephen Bartlett the other night live in London, and he was talking about one of the guests he had on the show, and he brought up this point about how you should focus on the 20%, not the 80%. It was from I think it was the founder or the CEO of Dermatologica. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to save that to go back to it. And as I was scrolling through his posts, through his episodes, I realized how easy it is to go back through previous episodes on Spotify or Apple Music to find something that resonates with you or that you might want to find. If I flip that into today, I went to go find your post on the 47 reasons to have a podcast. It probably took me about 20 minutes to find it on LinkedIn because there's no way to, like, it's not easy to find previous posts. So, what my basis on this is, it took, if I'd have not had a valid interest in going back and finding your post today, I'd have given up on LinkedIn. But
Yeah.
the same thing on the podcast probably took me 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
the whole usability of it to an extent is so much easier on podcast because the UX of those platforms is about people engaging and looking at past playlists and things like that. So it's more engineered for people to go back to your content and listen to it again and again and again, which I found it really interesting when I was looking today. And you mentioned then about people saving it and going back to it as well. I
Yeah.
think the other thing for me is, what's better to sell your product than going around all the team all day, catching them off guard and going, "What's your favorite dish in the restaurant?" And they go, I
Well,
don't know, fillet steak. You go to the next guy, it's chicken. There's a lot to be said for that, I think, and it's yeah, don't overthink it, I guess.
100%. Well, Scott, do you remember, like, back in the day, we used to call it booth time. In January, February, we wanted our servers to have booth time. And what that was is that
Yeah,
the restaurants are usually quiet, right? They're quiet through those months. So we said, well, what we recommend you, if you can, obviously, maybe it's a little bit different today. Um, Sit down with your customers, sit down with the tables, and talk to them about the restaurant, the dishes they're eating, the history that is in the restaurant that we have here. And you would see people used to kneel down at the table, and we didn't like that because their head was like parallel to the dish, and I was like, that's kind
yeah.
of gross. So we actually said, why don't you just, if there's room, pull up a chair to the booth or sit in the booth. So that was we called it booth time in January and February. Spend time in the booths and build your client. You may not be busy, sit down for like 2 minutes. It's not like a long one, but those guests we would sit with, and then all of a sudden you're starting storytelling. So I think when you
Mm.
look at a restaurant and you see your regulars come in, wouldn't it be like, how would you feel, Scott, if you're in my restaurant all the time? I know who you are. because I've made my I've done my things right, and I've went over and introduced myself and everything else. And I may go over to the table again. I see you in the restaurant. And I say, you know what, Scott, you're awesome. You're so loyal to us. You're an awesome customer of ours. We would love for you to be on our podcast that we have for our restaurant. And we want to hear how much you love coming here. We want to hear who you are as well, and what you do for a living. So we can actually pay homage to your hospitality and or your you as a guest, and we want to provide you this extra additional hospitality that we offer at our restaurant. Would you like to be on our show? How would you
Mm,
feel as a customer that goes to that restaurant and you're loyal all the time, and the manager came up and specifically invited you to an event to talk about yourself, and how would you feel? I think people, like, I've done it. People get over the moon because what you said to them is, "You're special to me. You're so
mm,
special. I want to capture that moment with you on our podcast that goes out to thousands of people, and it's a part of our brand at our restaurant." That customer, I
yeah.
guarantee it, is going to run home or be so excited. They may even post something about coming on. Maybe you tell them that as well. Post about coming on my show, and they're going to come in. Maybe you go to their work or to their home, or you invite them back and you buy them a meal to enjoy over a podcast, and you're capturing that.
Mm,
That is marketing on steroids, my friend. I
mm,
think that is so
mm,
powerful. And you don't have to do that every night. Maybe it's once a month or twice a month or once a week you find that person, and you constantly, because you know what happens is when you record that and you put that podcast out and you share that with that person, how many people they're going to share that podcast episode that they're on, and you got their face on the front of the cover, and you've mentioned their name, and you've mentioned how special they are to you. You don't think that that person's going to repost that 1,000 different ways and share that with all the different people? It's almost the opposite of the bad reviews. It's the positive
mm.
review model. They're going to share it with everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's amazing, isn't it, when we do what we do, how people are so engaging to come on
Yeah.
shows because of the exact same thing, right? It's There's no reason why you can't use it. I just pulled up a comment that we both replied on when I did the article about the
Okay.
first one.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it was and you can go back and see it if you're listening to this, but it said recommending a podcast to every restaurant without knowing its positioning, target audience, strategy, or challenges doesn't make sense. Not every restaurateur is suitable for podcasts, has something interesting to say, or, mind you, has the time. It's like saying every restaurateur should go on TikTok, needs an amazing website, and needs to embrace AI, etc., etc. Strategy before tactics, not blanket statements. Um, and we went back and forth for a while, me and this guy, and it's probably reason we're doing this follow up, to be honest. But like,
Yeah.
what would you say about that? I mean, every restaurant should have a podcast. Every restaurant has Instagram. Should every restaurant have TikTok? My opinion on that is, if you're not looking at it, then you absolutely should be, because it's where the next generation of customers are going. Again, podcasts. Everyone listens and consumes content in a different way.
Hmm.
So it's not about saying people must. It's about saying everyone should. I think that's the key for
Yeah.
me. But what's your theory on that? Because yeah, it was quite an interesting perspective.
Yeah, it is. I think the thing is there's a couple things that comes to my mind when I hear someone that says, you don't blanket everyone and throw everyone in there. Well, I think there was a time when I had this conversation 20 years ago, Scott, was why does every restaurant need a Facebook page when Facebook came out? And we realized that as well. And they said, well, some people are like, no, I don't need it. I don't have to have it. I shouldn't, I don't need this. Same kind of thing happened back then. And then obviously we come up today, 20 years later, that we come up and go, well, like you can't not have a social channel in your restaurant now unless you're, you know, like you just can't have it. It's almost ridiculous to say it that you don't have that free advertising channel. And I think today we're at the cusp of saying, when we say every restaurant should have a podcast, is thinking about it in the means of how do you communicate your content out that people believe it? And it's, technically it's free. It's just a model that we're shifting towards. The society is really looking at story based content, right? And that's why when you look at social, and that's why TikTok is doing so well, because most of the stuff that's on there is a story format of a story. And we're leaning into that more of that model. And I think from where we look at blanking every restaurant, I personally think we're at that stage right now that every restaurant is going to be starting to look at a new channel to get their information out. They're going to start looking for a new one if they aren't already, right? They're all looking for it. Like they go, well, I posted on Facebook. Well, so is you and the other millions, zillion the restaurants a day do the same thing. And unless you're doing some sort of format that's different, guess what? You're white noise, and you're falling into the competition against huge brands that spends billions of dollars on marketing out to you every day. So you're going to lose 10 to 1. I think when you look at every restaurant should is based on also the experience I've had in the industry of sitting down and having a coffee with hundreds and thousands of restaurateurs over the years, going, there's so many stories to have. The biggest challenge will be the time. It will be the time. It will be the commitment of
Mm.
time. Now, no different than social, back to social. We were looking at, do I have to have a social media person on my staff? I remember talking to that way back in the day, saying you may want to have someone on your staff. Some restaurants already have social media people on their staff, or they're hiring it out. And I think when you look at it today, that will be the biggest little bit of a bump. Will making the decision, do you have it as a part of your marketing strategy where you build it into your model of your restaurant, or do you have it as a bolt on, or do you hire it out? Those will be choices that people will have to make down the road to really adapt to this model. But I think as soon as you start, and I'm working with a restaurant here in Edmonton right now to launch theirs, as soon as you start and you have a commitment and you will get going, you will see the impact of what it does. And then it'll be one of those things no different than social going, I don't know how we did it without before. It's just right now we're in
Mm.
the first phases of this that you'll have people thinking that no restaurant has time. Well, you know what? I always believe every restaurant has time if there's value within what you're delivering to your guests. You will make time. You will find time. You will make it happen. It's just not a priority because it's new to our industry. But we all believe all these podcasters today, Scott. We believe all these
Yeah.
amazing podcasters outside of our industry every day. We believe the ones that are like yourself in the industry. We believe all this content. Now the next shift is moving to telling the stories of these operators. I just think it's the next evolution, and we'll see
Yeah.
us talking about this 10 years from now. Going, okay, everyone's got one now. What's next, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a guy actually in Dubai. It's just come to me now, who it was exec chef of the Me Hotel, and he started doing his own podcast, and he started interviewing friends like other chefs in the city, and they'd be having conversations about being chefs, about people they'd worked with, XYZ, chats about the kitchen, and it was super engaging at the same time, because it was you get a little bit of
Yeah.
personality coming through. You get to learn what it's all about to be chefs and how different chefs have created it. So again, there's just so many different opportunities to do content. And when the guy said that, it was like, okay, but of course, everything needs a strategy. So when you're there saying every restaurant needs a podcast, you're not expecting people to just pick up a mic and start freestyling. Like everything has to have a strategy. You have to understand what you're going to talk about. Otherwise, your viewers won't get what it's about. But it's it's got to live as part of your social strategy that's there because it's online, which makes it a part of your social strategy, right?
Yeah, and that you're right. Yeah. Let's clarify that. It's not a hey, grab a mic and let's just talk. There has to be a strategy in place, and there has to be like what is the format? Are we going to do interview based? Or are we just going to tell stories? Are we going to do it this way? Or like, there's the one that we're building right now. There's a massive strategy behind it about how do we incorporate community involvement into it as well, and how do we bring chefs in from the community be a part of this community, and then how do we bring celebrities, how do we bring other people into it to also humanize the brand. And the biggest thing I find also in today's world, especially in our industry, and we're seeing this come very fast into our industry, is humanizing the brands that we have, from McDonald's to, Big Chicken, all, all these, like Shaq O'Neal with Big Chicken is a great example. Shaq has already an amazing brand, but he's humanizing a chicken, a fast food chicken
Mm.
restaurant. And this goes back to, the 70s and 80s, when we knew who Dave was at Wendy's, or we knew KFC, the Colonel. Like, we had humanized people. We humanized those brands with people. And I think we'll see that come out more and more. But this avenue allows you to do that. It allows you to talk about stuff that you normally can't in a social post. Or I think I think we're gonna question more and more social posting as AI becomes very big part of that. I think we'll question more and more of, is it authentic or is it all AI? And that, I
Yeah.
think we'll have. I said this earlier before we started. There will be a separation, I believe, between this is AI created and this is human created. And
Mhm.
and I know the AI is not robotics of the 90s, the call in, the bank automation on a phone. That's not what it is. It's incredibly good. That's the crazy part of the AI integration. It's really good, but I think we're going to see the separation so we can make a decision and have a choice. That's the one thing I don't think will ever change, Scott, is humans will always want a choice. When you take away the
Yeah, I
choice,
think you're right.
they right, like, they'll always have a choice. So, do I choose to listen to this podcast and believe in what they're saying, or do I listen to a robot, AI, and believe what they say? I think we're going to win until
Yeah.
until AI becomes creative, innovative, or also tells stories that we believe. That's the big thing too, trust, right? So
Mm.
I think we'll be many moons down the road before we worry about that. But this AI coming into the podcast space, um, there might be an opportunity to blend them together. So it's an AI having a conversation with a human. That'd be kind of cool. Those kind of things I think we'll see come out in the next year. I think you'll see AI coming in more and more, but I think we'll have to define. There might even be government comes in and defines what's AI generated and what's not. I feeling that's coming. We saw that with the strikes in Hollywood.
Yeah.
They said no, we're not going to be replaced with AI. And I think the same thing will come in this space of, do you want to listen to an AI one, or do you want to listen to someone that's lived and breathed it? And it might be both. You never know. I just think we need to be open minded around that. But as long as people have choice, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah. I can't agree more. And I think that's probably a great way to end the episode. I think we've answered the questions. I was just going back and looking at them. I think we tackled it, and yeah, I think listen, I'm definitely on your bus when it comes to this. I think it's a huge opportunity for people to diversify their content that they're already producing. The other one that actually just came into my mind is it's so easy now with so Mac users. You can go on their QuickTime. You can take any video and you can get an audio only file off that video. So if you're
Yeah,
doing something for socials, if you're doing reels, if you're doing anything like that, you could. It's so easy to take that audio off, and it's just a different place to post it and have people engaging. Because back to your point about choice, there's often I can go. I love TikTok. I find it obsessive. My wife always takes the mickey out of me, but there's some days I don't look at it for days because I'm just not in the right place,
yeah,
time to watch videos. So I need to listen to something. I listen to podcasts. So if it's on those days where I can't look at TikTok and video format, if I can listen to it in my ears on a podcast, who cares where I consume the
yeah.
content, as long as I've got choice that fits my schedule to do it. And I think that's how people should view this from it as well. So, listen,
100%,
Jay,
100%.
thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it, and it's always good to spend some time with you. And yeah, and listen, this time I've got something very special for you.
You got dire straits. I I thought I thought you're I thought you were gonna pull up a turnip.
No, 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 no. The turnips aren't here this time. It's dire straits for you. So that was just for you. But listen, Jay, really appreciate it as always. Great to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Hospitality Huddles. I really hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you did, please leave a review wherever you might listen to your podcasts. It really helps the show, and it's only going to take a couple of minutes. If you don't want to miss a future episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get it into your feed as soon as each episode is released. Hospitality Huddles is brought to you by Auden Hospitality, helping hoteliers to think differently to create F&B outlets that their guests will love. Learn more about how we help hotel operations every single day by visiting our website at audenhospitality.com. This has been Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality meets conversation, one huddle at a time. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.